A warm welcome to Afghanistan International's Talar, Washington's Dialogue. In this episode, we discuss Taliban-Pakistan relations 5 years after the Taliban's takeover. 5 years after the Taliban's return to power, relations between Pakistan and the Taliban authorities have shifted from close cooperation to growing tensions over security, border disputes, and political differences. Today, we will review what has changed, why it matters, and what it means for the future of the region. Joining us for these discussions are three distinguished guests. We will also take questions from our audiences toward the end of this program. Our guests are David Sedney, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Central Asia; Arif Ansar, Chief Analyst at PolyTact; and Waheed Omer, former Ambassador of Afghanistan to Italy and currently Senior Advisor at Denton's Global Advisor. Thank you so very much, everyone, for joining us in this program. Well, let's start our conversation with David Sedney. Please make your case. What are the main reasons that Pakistan is at war with Afghan Taliban, if war is a proper word here?
Well, I would first say, yes, war is the proper word because people are dying. It is not constant everyday war, but people are dying. And so it is, in my definition, that is a war. And war is, as has been said, the continuation of diplomacy by other means. And there are some real diplomatic interest at play here. And people only go to war, countries only go to war when they can't resolve them diplomatically. And I think in this case, Pakistan has become very frustrated with the Taliban leadership over the last 5 years. When the Taliban defeated the United States in August of 21 and took over Kabul, Pakistan, I think, hoped to have a reprise of the situation of the first Taliban government from 1996 to 2001, when Pakistan played a huge role in running ministries, running the Taliban military, running the Taliban intelligence. And they sent many advisors to Afghanistan to help it try and recreate that situation. But they found the Taliban were different. The Taliban of 20 years before were no longer ready to be subservient to Pakistan. They believed that they had won the war, that they deserved the credit, that they had defeated the United States. And they didn't want to be second string to Pakistan or to anybody else. And there have been a number of tensions, particularly over the role of the Tehrik-i-Taliban of Pakistan and their goal of turning Pakistan into a Taliban state. And those tensions continued, but to me, the tipping point was the Taliban's attempt to use India as a card against Pakistan. And the tipping point event was a visit about 2 months ago of the Taliban foreign minister to India, where he was received at very high levels. I think he was there for about 8 days, met all kinds of people throughout India, and it was a real signal to the world of close relationships between the Taliban and in India. The Taliban turned over the embassy in New Delhi to the Taliban. The Indian government turned over the Afghan embassy to the Taliban in New Delhi. The Indians sent many new personnel to their embassy in Kabul, and it appeared that Afghanistan was really getting close to India. Well, that is not something that Pakistan could really accept. Field Marshal Munir, who is the most important person in Pakistan, I think sent many messages in different ways, and the Taliban didn't appear to listen. So finally, they decided to use the message that really matters, military force, which is what I think they've been doing. They're trying to get the Taliban to recognize that Pakistan is more important than India, and the Taliban, to my mind, are not yet listening, and maybe they'll never listen. So I don't know how this is going to end, but to me, that's that India-Pakistan-Afghanistan dynamic that is at the core of the current hostilities.
So, Mr. Sedney, your conclusion is that this war is real?
When people are dying, it's a real war, yes.
Mr. Ansar, in your opinion, David Sedney mentioned Asim Munir. I think he is the most powerful guy in Pakistan at this moment. What has been going on through his mind in the past few months or in the past couple of years the Taliban are running in Afghanistan, what he really wants from Afghan Taliban. Does he want to oust Afghan Taliban? Does he want to put more pressure on Afghan Taliban? What is his strategy?
Arif, thanks for having us and thanks for having me. I think we have to look at kind of the history of how we got to this stage. Obviously, the present leadership, military leadership in Pakistan is having to deal with what we have right now. But as you know, there have been a couple of approaches that have been tried in the past, the military or the political. So that dynamic has always been playing out. And soon after the withdrawal of US withdrawal from Afghanistan, like David mentioned, there was a thinking that now there will be Pakistan and Afghan Taliban will have their old alliance back, but that didn't turn out that way. And the other hypothesis turned out to be correct, that Afghan Taliban were not listening. Not only that, they were not controlling TTP. This nexus was not new. This existed during the war on terror too, and when US was in Afghanistan, and they. Obviously, the motivation then was different. Now, when US withdrew, that motive was gone. Afghan Taliban were done. And Pakistan was demanding the same of the TTP, that now the motivation is not there. They didn't do that. They continued and to attack the Pakistani security apparatus and military. And it came down to it that the political dialogue was continuing with the TTP leadership as well. This was the time when PTI government was in power, and it came to a point that I think there was a realization that the political dialogue is not going to be able to solve the problem. And to understand that why, we have to look at what were the TTP's key demands. What were the TTP demanding? So Afghan Taliban have said that we can facilitate the talks with TTP, but we can't force them to accept what Pakistan was saying. And the TTP's demand was that they wanted the FATA merger to be reversed. The the federally administered tribal areas with Pakistan, they wanted that merger to be reversed. Second, they were demanding that Pakistan military withdraws from the tribal area. And that was kind of a non-starter too. And the third was that they wanted to implement their own version of Sharia in those lands. So there were certain demands that became non-starters, or I think reached a point that they realized that this is not going to get resolved through a dialogue. And then what has happened now is the culmination of a number of dialogue processes in which other interlocutors have played a part. Chinese tried a couple of times.
Yes, Qataris and other countries, but it didn't work
out. And then that led to the conclusion, I think, in Pakistan particularly, that what are the motives? What are Afghan Taliban trying to do here? Is TTP to them more important than Pakistan? They are, they are willing to go to that extent to go to war. What is their ambition? And that has, on top of that, the Balochistan problem has been getting worse. And now there are reports that there is some collusion between the TTP and the BLAs and Afghan Taliban. To what extent, the details, I don't know, but at least that's there. And that brings in India to the equation, like David mentioned. So it culminated into that military strategy of what's transpiring now to build pressure on Afghan Taliban to change that calculation.
Yeah, to change. We'll talk about the change that Pakistanis have been talking in the past couple of years. But let me ask Mr. Omer, you are familiar with Pakistan's strategies in the past couple of years, the past 2 decades. You worked with Afghan leaders, up close. I think my question is that many people say that Asim Munir and Pakistan's army are not that naive, that didn't know who the Taliban are. Mullah Hibatullah or Haqqani and other factors of the Taliban. Many people don't believe that all of a sudden Islamabad realized that Taliban are quite dangerous, and it's dangerous to us, to Pakistan's interests. I think my question is that unpack this, that what has changed that Asim Munir and Pakistani army realized that Afghan Taliban are dangerous and we have to launch attacks?
So this is a very multifaceted question, but here's what I think. I pretty much agree with the fact that the root of this is in Pakistan's miscalculation in August 2021. That's when Khwaja Asif posted, "You have power, we have Allah," when the Taliban took over. And when the ISI chief came to Kabul, famously in Serena, and raised a glass of coffee in that case. I think that calculation at that time was that we have a friendly government finally in Kabul who will also hand TTP over to us. Remember that at the same time as Taliban were taking Kabul, there were already negotiations with the TTP on the part of the establishment. And by late 2001, early 2002, they had got into some kind of a framework, which later then was broken in 2022. So that miscalculation, as was said, that Afghanistan will go back to 1996 to 2021, where there will be a government in Kabul, which will be subsidized and which will be totally under control. That did not work out. The reason was these Taliban were not the Taliban who started from Sangasar in Kandahar and arrived in Kabul without having seen the world. These Taliban, they were claiming they had defeated NATO, that they were in touch with every day with ambassadors from different countries and so on. And also the environment around, they had a lot of support. Remember in 96, Pakistan was the only gateway for Taliban to the world.
And recognizes Taliban.
Yeah, even Saudis and UAE, they did it at the behest of Pakistan. But this time when the Taliban came in, they had Russia on their side, they had Central Asian republics, they had Iran and China and everybody else. So that calculation backfired. And now when you have somebody who is your protege and then they basically go rogue, your reaction is usually very angry. So that's probably one of the reasons why Pakistan. But there are also another couple of dimensions to it. I think post 2020, mid-2025, the reason why this got very hot also has to do with India-Pakistan war, that they had the direct war between India and Pakistan, where I believe India decided that it was better to engage Pakistan in the backyard than directly. That has to do with it, with that part as well. And one other reason that comes to my mind is Pakistan's standing with the United States. Remember last year or in 2024, President Trump would talk about Bagram and the weapons that are left in Afghanistan.
Afghan minerals.
Almost every appearance. And I think Pakistan saw an opportunity to talk to the administration here to basically take the Afghan project in a way which I believe has worked to some level. They have some credit here they have a good credit score here in Washington, however temporary that is. They do have that, and I think they're using that in order to find some kind of a way out of the current situation in KPK and in Balochistan, and to punish the Taliban for not being as loyal as they were expected to be. Yeah.
So the interesting point, Mr. Omer, you say that they demanded to take over the project. So let me ask you this question. Has the United States handed over Afghanistan to Islamabad?
I have no direct information to suggest. I have not seen anything, obviously. I have not seen a contract, but I believe that there is some level of understanding between the Pakistani establishment
Mhm.
after General Munir, Marshal Munir, Field Marshal Munir visited Washington twice last year. And the way things unfolded here in terms of narrative in DC, and also the way things unfolded afterwards in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, I believe there is some level of understanding that Pakistan will try to uh, basically make sure that the weapons that are left in Afghanistan are not do not go in the hands of dangerous people.
Dangerous
And
to
that the
Pakistan.
Taliban,
Mhm.
yes,
Mhm.
and that the Taliban will be in check in Kabul. So the reason why there were bombardments, I don't think, without Pakistan believing that there will be at most silence in DC,
Mhm.
they wouldn't have bombarded Kabul.
Kabul. Okay,
Yes.
so that's your conclusion. Let me ask this question from Mr. Sedney as well. So you have a lot of experiences. You know Pakistan's also, you know this strategy of the United States. Let me ask you this question. There is like a concern or a wondering, a question among so many people that say, well, the United States of America has been looked into Afghanistan mostly through the eyes of Pakistan. Do you think that at this moment, whatever Asim Munir does in Afghanistan or his colleagues or Pakistan's army, somehow coordinated with Washington, with the Pentagon?
I think it's more complicated than that, as opposed to any kind of direct understanding or agreement, written agreement or anything. As Mr. Omer was saying, no direct evidence, but in these kind of things, you don't need direct evidence. You need to watch what is really happening. And it's clear that Field Marshal Munir has played his cards extremely well with President Trump, because you keep saying the United States, but in US policy today, it's not the United States that makes decisions. It's not the United States Congress. It's not individuals except for President Trump. He's the only one who matters in these things. And when Pakistan nominated President Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize for ending the Pakistan-India war, and Prime Minister Modi said, no, he doesn't deserve it, that made a clear tilt, very strong tilt in the United States, admiration for Pakistan, but particularly for Field Marshal Munir, who Trump has called his favorite field marshal. Today, over the last several months, the role that Pakistan has been playing in the negotiations with Iran is something that's clearly very appreciated by President Trump. So Pakistan's standing, Marshal Munir's standing, has gone way up. And in that situation, the United States, which I believe really most Americans, and certainly President Trump, want to forget about Afghanistan. It's not so much that they're doing a calculation. They don't care about Afghanistan. If Pakistan does things, the United States doesn't care. So it's not that they've signed any kind of agreement.
Well,
it's just that they're fine with it as it is, and they're not going to say anything about it. And the more Marshal Munir is successful in other areas, the more the United States would just stand back.
Well, President Trump talked about Afghanistan a lot. So recently he mentioned Afghanistan and the weapons that United States left in Afghanistan. Why do you think he keeps talking about Afghanistan? Do you think that has something to do with Islamabad's strategy?
No, I think it has a lot to do with the fact that President Trump is 80 years old and repeats a lot of what he says. A lot of old people just repeat what they said in the past. I don't think it has anything to do with strategy. I think it's just that he, and it's in other areas as well, he just repeats what he said in the past without really thinking about it. So I'm sorry, everybody, I think, wants to have a strategy. But most recently, the U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for South and Central Asia was in front of Congress and was asked, what is the U.S. strategy for South and Central Asia and Afghanistan and all? And he said, we're working on it. We don't even have one. So we don't have a strategy in the U.S. There's no strategy. There's just President Trump's emotional responses and his old talking points that he repeats because he's an old man.
Mr. Ansar, so you mentioned about negotiations that had been going on between Pakistanis and Taliban. Once happened in China, in Qatar. I think at one point the Iranians tried to make something. but they did not work. And Pakistanis have been clear about their demands. TTP, but it didn't happen. Taliban didn't hand over TTP to Pakistan. Um, Taliban have a good relationship relatively to India. So I think my question is that what's next for Asim Munir and what's next for Islamabad?
I think in the context of what's happening is the strategy from Pakistan seems to be building the pressure on Afghan Taliban to be able to change their calculation, and it's the soft approach seems to have not worked as was adopted previously, and it's not the handing over of TTP; it's more of disarming, in the sense of that the motivation, the purpose for why TTP was fighting in cahoots with the Afghan Taliban previously is gone. So that's not necessarily to hand them over. The second demand has been that to exert pressure on TTP to stop from the attacks they are carrying on in Pakistan. And the Afghan Taliban position has been that no, they are not involved. TTP is not involved.
They did not even accept that TTP are active in Afghanistan.
So yeah, so that's gone back and forth.
So yeah, my question is that so you follow Pakistan's foreign policies, you have written about. So my question is that now, what are the next steps for Islamabad if the approaches that we have talked about didn't work?
So what's happening is militarily getting escalated. As we know, recently Mullah Akhundzada has developed some kind of 4,000 soldiers force, Habitullah battalion or something that's going to be focused on the border area. So it's escalating, and after the Russian defense agreement that Afghan Taliban were able to secure, I guess they were exaggerating, but they made certain comments that were threatening towards Pakistan as well. But I think with the Iran calculation, with the Iran negotiations that recently happened, and if it sticks, the space is further going to get decreased for the Afghan Taliban in the sense of the support they have. Not because just of that, also because India itself, I think if the negotiations and the agreement, the Iran agreement goes forward, the space for India is going to decrease as well, because Pakistan has gone out of the way to support Iran. And Pakistan would expect from Iran reciprocity, which previously, as you know, one of the
Yeah, before we talk about the regional dynamics, so let me ask you this question before asking another question from Mr. Omer. So imagine Afghan Taliban say, we're going to solve this security problem. We're going to somehow handle TTP in Afghanistan. So do you think that would be the end game for Islamabad, or Islamabad is seeking something broader in Afghanistan? So I think another phrases. So is Pakistan's problem only security, or it is a political problem with Afghan Taliban? They don't want Hibatullah, Sirajuddin, Maulawi Abdul Hakim, and other Taliban leaders in power in Afghanistan.
I don't think so. It's just strictly Pakistan. It's also the US. So, the Doha Agreement signed in 2020, it had certain stipulations. Have Taliban followed or abided by any of those? I'm not clear. According to Tom West, who was the US representative to Afghanistan soon after this, when he was in office during an event at the US Institute for Peace, he comments that he doesn't see that Taliban is abiding by any of those terms. And what are those terms? One of them was obviously that Afghan soil is not used for attacks on other countries or US allies.
Yeah. So
The other one is the human rights or the women education. So it's not just, I think, that Pakistan doesn't like Habitullah or that gang, and I think you're referring to is regime change. But it's, I think, from Pakistan's context, and historically, Pakistan likes to have a friendly, what they call friendly Afghanistan. And if it's not because of the, Indian and what's, an old traditionally called the pincer movement, two fronts, it didn't want to face the two fronts. So it wants a more friendlier, and especially when, as David had alluded to earlier, if they're building ties with India, that gets even more threatening
Yeah,
towards.
India is a big problem
So
for
it's not just, I would
Pakistan.
say, Pakistan, it's more than that. And as you said, Chinese and others have been involved as well.
Okay, so Mr. Omar, let me ask you this question. So, why the leader of Afghan Taliban hasn't released a statement, a fatwa, or something like that to say, jihad against Pakistan is not acceptable, for instance. So we are not supporting TTP. We haven't seen any statements from the leader of Afghan Taliban. At the meantime, we have seen many statements from Mullah Hibatullah about other things, about dress codes, about Eid, different occasions, but not about Pakistan. So why not saying we don't support TTP?
I would not speak on his behalf, but here's what I think. I believe this is another miscalculation that was done in 2021. With every other miscalculation, one miscalculation was when Taliban take over power in Afghanistan, they will hand over, or as you say, disarm, or they will cut ties or cut support, anything with the TTP. I think this was naive because remember TTP has a what we call bayat to the head of the Afghan Taliban. The TTP, head of TTP, basically sees the Taliban leader as their leader, the TTP. That was something that we all know about. Number two, politically and militarily, Pakistan over the past, let's say, 50 years or so, since 1975, they have always had a proxy in Afghanistan. See, they used the newly arrived Mujahideen leaders against Dawood Khan. They used them against the PDPA government. Then again, when the Mujahideen took power, relations fell apart. Then they used Taliban as a proxy against them. During 96 to 2021, they didn't need a proxy in Afghanistan. But after 2021, with our government, they started using Taliban as a proxy again. This is the first time where Pakistan, in the past 50 years, Pakistan does not have a proxy to use. That's why the direct bombardments. So when they basically bombarded Kabul and other provinces, my first reaction was, if this was 10 years ago, they didn't have to do it. They would have basically orchestrated suicide bombings or a car bomb to the Taliban or another proxy. So the fact that they are doing it, escalating it at this level, this means they do not have people to do it for them. It's the reverse situation now. I believe now the people who are ruling Kabul now, they have a proxy inside Pakistan, which is the TTP. So it will be naive to believe that you have an ideological proxy in Pakistan that you can use as a pressure point, and then you surrender it or disarm it for the sake of Pakistan. So remember what was said earlier, the Taliban this time, they believe that they have defeated 50, 40, whatever countries of NATO and their allies. And it's hard for Pakistan to basically, also because they are very, they know Pakistan. Pakistan knows them. That's right. But also the Taliban know Pakistan. So it's not that it's a one-sided understanding of your enemy. Both know each other. And it's hard because they are insurgents. They have fought all this kind of, the roadside bombs and everything else. They basically, we were under a lot of international obligations, right? When we knew what was happening on the other side in Pakistan, but we had a lot of international obligations and a lot of problems with our international partners in trying to convince them. Taliban don't need that.
Yeah.
And they don't need a war against Pakistan. They can do certain things. TTP can do certain things.
So,
Hmm.
therefore,
Hmm.
Afghan Taliban who ran Kabul, took power in Afghanistan, are not the proxy of Pakistan. That's your conclusion.
I should remind you of one thing. There are two narratives within the Afghan society.
What's
that you
your
know-
opinion?
Wait, let me tell you. There are two narratives, and both of them equally strong. One is that this is a staged war, okay? And the reason behind the stage war for the people who support that narrative is that Pakistan is trying to neutralize internal political opposition, PTI and PTM and everybody else, by engaging in some kind of a staged clash with the Taliban. That is one. And the Taliban needed to basically rally national support because lately, over the past 50 years, the only way you can rally people emotionally behind the government is to have some kind of a war with Pakistan.
Yeah, that's a separate point. Yes, a separate point. Yeah.
Wait, please. That's one narrative. The other narrative is that this is real. It's happening because of all the miscalculations that Pakistan has done, and Pakistan is really fighting the Taliban, and Taliban are fighting them. And I tend to be leaning more towards the fact that this is real. It's happening. As Sedney said,
therefore,
people are killing each other. There are people killed, and there's in Pakistan over in 2025. Remember, in 2020 when we were in power, Pakistan lost 150 security forces, police, ranger, and army. In 2025, they lost more than 600. That's four. So if that's happening, then of course something is going on. There is,
therefore,
a
yeah.
real
So just
thing
make it
happening.
yeah.
Yes.
Therefore, they are not proxy of Rawalpindi.
They have been a proxy for a long, long
They
time.
were, but you mentioned that
Have you seen
for the
Jason
first
Bourne?
time.
Have you
Yes.
seen the movie Jason Bourne? When your own agent turns against you, it happens.
Okay. So let me ask you another question, Mr. Omer. If Taliban are not the proxy of Pakistan, who are they? Are they the representative of Afghan people?
There is no state of being as whether Taliban are proxies or not proxies. They were a proxy of Pakistan used during the 20 years of the US presence in Afghanistan in the Republic. Now they have fallen over, they have fallen out with each other. They could go back to something.
fair
they
enough,
could find
fair
and
enough,
find.
yes, thank you.
They could find. But to say if they are not the proxies of Pakistan at this point, then they are the representatives of the Afghan people. Of course not. Obviously not. They have taken Kabul by force. They're sitting there by force. A majority of people don't want them, but that doesn't mean that, that has nothing to do with their current situation with Pakistan.
Fair enough, thank you. One follow-up question. Do you think, Mr. Omar, that Pakistan's army is an enemy of Afghan people?
Now, there is, obviously, it's a question that doesn't have a very clear-cut answer. It depends on what the Pakistan army does.
Well,
So
I think
as an institution, as an institution, you are not always my friend. You are not always my enemy. Depends on how you behave with me. I could react angrily if you do something that I feel
at this point, I think my question is, I think you have enough knowledge to understand their point of view, their strategy. The president that you were working with publicly said that Pakistan doesn't want a democratic and free government in Afghanistan. That's public. Over and over we have heard. I think my question is that at this point, Pakistan
doesn't even want the Taliban government now. It's
that's my question. That's my question. They didn't want. So therefore, it's an enemy of Afghan people.
Listen, there is.
Let me interrupt here. institutions like the Pakistani army are not enemies of anybody.
Mhm.
They exist to support their state. The Pakistani army exists to support the Pakistani state. In fact, many people would say Pakistani army is the Pakistani state.
Yes.
So their objective is to protect and defend and keep the Pakistani state going. That's their objective. Armies don't hate. Countries don't hate. They act in interest.
The interest. Okay. Let me ask.
Don't use that message.
Let me ask you
that they
this
hate
question.
anybody.
Yeah. Let me ask you this question. I think this question is a valid question that people ask: whether Islamabad at this point wants a free Afghanistan, a democratic government, a system that helps Afghan people and the people of Afghanistan want, or Islamabad obviously doesn't care if Afghan people have access to a democratic system. They just want Taliban as a puppet to listen to Islamabad and do whatever they want.
Again, I would reject the "or" that you have there and say that they want what is best for Pakistan.
Yes.
What they think is best for Pakistan's interests. As we heard before, they don't want Afghanistan to be used as a second front against Pakistan. Pakistan has always been an insecure state. It's only been formed since 1948. Pakistan will always worry that India wants to take over Pakistan. So they look at it from that perspective. Afghanistan is a subsidiary, as I mentioned before, interest to Pakistan. The number one interest, the number one concern is always going to be India. And so they see Pakistan sees Afghanistan as a subsidiary interest.
Do you think India supports Afghan Taliban right now?
Well, they clearly do. As I mentioned before, the ties at high levels, the increase in diplomatic exchanges, very clear that India is supportive of the Taliban.
So therefore, there is a war. So Pakistan is fighting India in Afghanistan.
Pakistan is wanting to push India back. Indians are not dying, so there's no war between them, but there's been a constant conflict between Pakistan and India since 1948, and hundreds of thousands of people died in 1948. But at the time of the partition, Pakistan and India did fight a real war, and I think in general I would say India didn't do so well in that war. But it's that geopolitical clash, I would call it, rather than a war.
So
And Arif, if I may add to the point that you're making, if Pakistan wants a democratic government in Afghanistan or not. So during the Doha Agreement, U.S. was pushing for this too, inclusive government. There was a term inclusive government that was always talked about, and that inclusive government meant that there would be talks about in various ethnicities and all of the groups that were involved, not only those who were fighting but those that were not fighting. That never happened. So now that it has come to the situation where we are talking about military operations and everything, Pakistan seems to be taking this position as well, that Afghan Taliban doesn't represent all of Afghanistan. They're using the nationalistic agenda to galvanize support for themselves. So not all factions believe in Afghan Taliban. It's just because of this situation they have to support.
but there is,
So there was this push for inclusive government that never happened.
but the question that many Afghans have is that Islamabad didn't do really good to Afghans in the past couple of decades.
So I'm not
Look what happened in the past couple of years. Only in one attack, 352 Afghan civilians got killed by Pakistani army. The UN confirmed this. So I think my question is that what Pakistan really want and what they would gain if they continue the policies that they have been practiced in the past couple of years.
I think it's the same that we talked about before as well, that they want to change the calculation of the Afghan Taliban to come to the realization that they can't be a friend of India, or take support from them. And then if the linkages exist that TTP is attacking, targets within Pakistan military establishment, and with BLA support, they're also targeting Chinese infrastructure. So obviously then what kind of reaction would one, if this is all true, then something has to be done. And what is that is yet to be seen, that how far the pressure goes, will it eventually lead to a political dialogue where parties agree that, okay, we will not support TTP anymore, or we are moving them from the border area. So in the past, this has happened too, that Afghan Taliban had claimed that they had moved TTP factions from the border area to some other place. But I don't know if it was true or not.
So let me ask you this, do you really believe that Islamabad wants to change Taliban or bring a new atmosphere or a system or support a kind of government that Afghan people want, that respect women, be responsible, democratic? Do you really believe that Pakistan wants that?
And Pakistan has never said that I know of.
Yeah.
So you're talking about something that maybe some Afghans
Pakistani
quite believe.
actually did say that.
They are saying it now.
Yes, they are
But-
saying, yes.
but
I
they-
have a few
yeah,
clues.
yeah.
Yes, they,
But
they
it's
are
not
saying,
serious.
yes.
Go ahead.
I think that the inclusive government part in Bona Agreement and representation of Afghan people is no concern in Islamabad. Let's say in Rawalpindi, in Islamabad, they have nothing to do with.
But it should be in Afghanistan.
Wait, wait. They have no
By the way, how
concern.
do you
as
know? How do
such.
you know that?
All right, I said there is no document signed by Pakistani government to say we do not believe in that. But I think what they're doing right now is to make sure that Taliban are either punished or they either surrender back to the Pakistan. It's not. I know there are things going on in Islamabad right now. There are people visiting Islamabad, and Pakistani government's current government's narrative of inclusive government, it's to put pressure on the Taliban that if you do not basically do what we say, we're going to organize some kind of an opposition to you, which by the way is logistically, politically, regionally
So
very difficult to do.
are you
Wait.
indicating that Pakistan wants to create a proxy in Afghanistan?
They have always been. There is
Okay,
there
this
is
is
one
an
thing we
important
always
question.
undercut.
This is really important.
There is one reason,
Uh-huh.
wait, there is one reason we always undercut from the discussion is a historic reason. Since 1947, Pakistan has never been able to provide security, governance in KPK, in Balochistan, as it does in Sindh and Punjab. Why is Punjab always stable? Why is Sindh stable? Why is KPK in Balochistan over the past 80 years never stable, and the government has hardly had the kind of control that it has? There is a historical reason
Yeah,
for
so
that.
let me ask you, because you raised a very important point.
Yes.
You said, so previously you said Afghan Taliban are not the proxy of Islamabad anymore, but later on you said
No,
that
I
Pakistan
don't want
is,
you to, no, let me say what I want to
creating-
say.
Okay, supporting some groups and they are communications, traveling, so on and so forth. Are you indicating that Pakistan is creating another proxies in Afghanistan? Because lately the opposition groups of Taliban have had some communications with Islamabad.
Number one,
Mhm.
I did not say Taliban or not the proxy. They have been proxy. They have been used as proxy. I was sitting in Kabul in the palace,
Oh.
and we had all kind of information.
Well, we got
documented
confused.
to understand.
I'm sorry, we got confused.
Listen.
You said that Pakistan for a long time had a proxy in Afghanistan, but for the first time they don't have. Now you say that Taliban are the proxy of Pakistan. Let's audience understand.
You're
not debating me. You're asking me
Yeah, yeah,
questions.
sure, sure.
Let me answer.
Okay, I think
You and I,
we're
we're not debating, right? So what I'm saying is, and what I've said it clearly, the Taliban is a proxy, but they have gone rogue at this moment.
Mhm.
That's what I wanted to say, and I think your viewers will understand what I said. On the part of whether the Pakistan army is an enemy, I said clearly that it depends on how they behave.
Mhm.
So they can be an adversary at a time when they change. We have had situations where we have had good conversations, good discussions. I remember in 2010, I think it was 10, General Pasha and General Kayani came to Kabul with Prime Minister Gilani at that time, and we had almost arrived to an understanding after the PPP government in Pakistan in 2028, arrived to an understanding. And at that point, we believed that things are going to change. Pakistan is no longer an adversary.
Fair enough.
But-
fair enough. Mhm.
So the question, there is nothing absolute in foreign policy in politics.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
cannot tell you who is a proxy, who is an enemy.
Okay.
It keeps changing.
sure.
I'm
Let
going
me-
to
yeah,
jump in
before-
here for a
yeah.
second. Yes, you asked Mr. Omar
Oh.
about the question of does Pakistan support democracy and women's rights in Afghanistan, and you said you had statements. But there's actually a really big, huge evidence that Pakistan doesn't support that
Yes.
because Pakistan had the opportunity to support exactly that kind of government for 20 years. And while it may have come close at times to an agreement, it never stopped. It never turned over the Taliban leadership to the government of Pakistan, to the government of Afghanistan. So Pakistan had the chance to support women's rights in Afghanistan, freedom and democracy in Afghanistan. It never did. It kept the Taliban alive in Pakistan as a weapon. So
Before I
you can
ask
never
follow-up
say that
questions, yes.
Pakistan supports women's rights in Afghanistan. They never did, and it's not something that anybody should take seriously.
Yeah, very, very strong point, Mr. Ansar. So, do you believe that Pakistan doesn't believe in human rights, democracy in Afghanistan, do whatever is in their interest, and it changes over the time?
So I think that you have to understand that Pakistan is also, and Afghanistan too, in the broader community of nations where great power rivalry is going on. Previously, it was Russia and the U.S. Afghan jihad happened. Everybody supported the Taliban. The jihadis.
I
So you
apologize
understand that.
before you mention that, because our audiences are ordinary people. Let us understand and let them understand. Do you think that Pakistan doesn't support in human rights in Afghanistan? Do you agree with our guests that mentioned?
It's not Pakistan. Again, it's the Doha agreements, and this was not Pakistan's term that was put in there. This was U.S. that stipulated that.
Well, Pakistan released
So
Mullah
Pakistan,
Baradar
if
from
we even-
prison, sent to negotiate with the U.S.
Sorry?
Pakistan released Mullah Baradar from prison to negotiate with Taliban.
Because that was the priority of the U.S. at the time. U.S. had arrived at a conclusion that in Afghanistan they are reconcilable and irreconcilable. And David may remember that. Reconcilable are those that have genuine interests, regional legitimacy, causes that they are fighting for. Irreconcilables are Al-Qaeda, Daesh, who have global ideological agendas, and U.S. was going to go use force against them.
Yes, so therefore, your point
That was
is
a
that
mistake by the U.S. The U.S. made some big mistakes globally and in Afghanistan. And certainly the Doha Agreement was a huge mistake by the United States.
Yeah.
Doha Agreement was bad policy. It was President Trump who agreed to the Doha Agreement. President Trump surrendered Afghanistan to the Taliban by agreeing to the Doha Agreement. And that was a big mistake by the United States. So just because I'm an American, I can disagree with American policy. Of course. Just because somebody is from Pakistan or wherever, doesn't mean that they have to support your policy.
Of course, no, but nonetheless, that's the agreement. And I'll quote once again. I'll quote Tom West again, who was the special representative for Afghanistan again. He made a statement at the same event that at that point, this event was, I think, maybe in 2022, that they don't see any evidence that the Afghan Taliban are following.
But it's pretty isolated himself
so,
at that
okay,
point.
but
Because
we're
but
running
he
out
was
of
the U.S.
time.
government at
We
the
are
time.
running out of time.
No,
Mr.
just
Ansar,
let me
sorry.
make the point.
So
He said that at the time U.S. is not supporting any opposition group against Taliban, but a time will come if they continue this that it will rise in the priority.
Okay, so let me ask you one question about the regional dynamic, Mr. Sedney. So Russia, there are some reports that Russia supported Afghan Taliban. They signed an agreement, and also Russia, as you know very well, is close to India, and India has a very close tie with the Afghan Taliban. It's a lot of games that have been going on and played in the region. So do you think that India and Russia will support Afghan Taliban against Pakistan?
Well, I think that is what India is trying to do. But of course, this is a delicate game. Foreign relations is not something where everything is clear and obvious on one side or the other. So India is playing cards. It is putting pressure, and Russia is part of that pressure. But India is not going to go so far, and never will be, to put troops in Afghanistan or anything like that. So this is a situation where India is trying to use Afghanistan without having to take any kind of responsibility of starting a war or anything like that. So it's a careful thing. The problem I see is the Taliban are not very sophisticated in international affairs, and so they are letting themselves be used by India. And Russia is part of this as well. Right now, Russia's in a weak position, and they're looking to do anything they can to strengthen their relationship with India and to undermine the U.S. And we'll see what happens.
Excellent. So we'll have a few questions from our audiences.
Thank you so much. My name is Nurzadeh. My question is like I want to mention a narrative and then ask the speakers if they agree or not. So the narrative is that is it possible that still Pakistan agrees with the presence of the Taliban in Afghanistan? They are still the proxy, but Pakistan still knows that the Taliban do not able to put any pressure on TTP. So that's why the current war is going on is the war between Pakistan and TTP, not a war between Pakistan with Afghan Taliban. So if we see in the ground that not even a single Taliban fighter or authorities be killed in this war, while Pakistan is able to put any bombs anywhere in Afghanistan and kill them because only attack the TTP bases. Is it like even maybe Taliban shows a kind of the green light to the Pakistan because we are not able to put any pressure on TTP, so you come and attack them? Thank you.
Can I go first?
Yeah,
Or do you want to make it more clear? I think it's pretty, it's not black and white, and nothing in this world is black and white. So my answers to all questions, there's very difficult to say exactly what is happening, because the only way you would know exactly what is happening if you were the leader of TTP, or if you were Haibatullah, or if you were General Munir. So you had access to all first-hand information. We're only looking at things from a distance and trying to make sense of it. And what I think is happening is that the Pakistanis are using their leverage that they have with the United States to try to get rid of TTP and everybody else, not only TTP, but everybody else in KPK, in Balochistan. Remember the leader, Dr. Maharang Baloch was sentenced to life yesterday. Manzoor Pashtun has been pushed to the wall and all that. So they're using this leverage where nobody is looking at them, at least US is not critical of them, to try to basically sort out problems that they have. And I believe that they're trying to pressurize Taliban to surrender TTP to them. Taliban will not do it, and it's going to be a continued strive. And
They will not do it or they are not able.
when it's a reversal of roles, okay? In 2000, Sedney, David remembers this. In 2008 and 9 and 10, we used to go to Pakistan to try to talk to the GHQ and others to say, would you please bring the Taliban on the table? And they would say, initially they would say, yes, okay, we will do it. And then at some point in 2010, 2011, I remember I was in the meeting when at that time General Kayani said, we have very limited leverage. We will try, but we have limited leverage. We might bring them to the table, but we cannot basically force them. So I think it's now a reversal. It's the same thing now that the Taliban are doing.
Okay.
Arif, let me add one thing to that, first of all, Pakistan has a large Pashtun population as well, actually, and many people don't realize it's bigger than what's in Afghanistan.
Yes.
So it's quite challenging for Pakistan to carry out these operations or what's happening on the other side of the border, because it's creating challenges for themselves as well. So the question of if Pakistan military is the enemy, it's like saying I'm my own enemy. They know there is a challenge. It's just the dynamics of the situation that begs the question when you ask what is the bigger strategy. The question becomes that what are Afghan Taliban trying to accomplish with all of this, with TTP, and as you mentioned, that they can cause a lot of things in Pakistan because they understand them and
Yes.
Pakistan
Well,
understands them.
that's a very good point. So his point is valid, Mr. Omar. What Taliban would gain out of this if they don't listen to, if they don't listen to Pakistan's concern and U.S. concern? So what they would gain out of this? They will lose power.
I have a feeling that they really don't care. It's not a government which has any international obligations.
Mm.
It does not feel it has any obligations for the Afghan people as a whole. It does not have any obligation that would basically make it think about the consequences of what it's doing, right? It's basically an insurgent group. Now it's in power. All they knew was basically waging insurgencies and so on. They came to Kabul believing that they have defeated the world and all that. They are running high on, on energy and all that. I don't think there is that calculation as to whether India or Russia are long-term partners and whether taking on Pakistan in this case is going to be something in Taliban's strategic interest.
Mhm.
But what I should also say this, I think Taliban believe at this point, from what I see, is that they're being pushed. It's not that they have started something even with the relations with India,
Mhm.
it didn't happen this way. It didn't happen. Taliban did not start a relation with India as a result of which Pakistan attacked
Yes.
Taliban.
Mhm.
It's the other way around. It's the cause and effect thing. Pakistan pressurized Taliban, and Taliban clung to India, and India was ready there too because of their own thing.
Mhm.
Remember, for an India whose government is a very radical Hindu government. Remember, the Modi government has departed from the secular India in promoting a Hindu strong government. They have no interest with the Taliban ideologically.
Yes.
But as we all know, when it comes to your country's interests, then ideologies and everything else doesn't matter.
Yes.
Otherwise, you cannot imagine Modi and Haibatullah being partners. The natural partner for Haibatullah is Hassan Munir,
Mhm.
and I think they have disagreements now. They might sort it.
They might sort
Possibly.
it. Okay.
Can I just go
okay.
back to one
Yes.
factual thing, though? The Pakistani military has killed Taliban fighters. It hasn't killed Taliban leaders, but it has killed Taliban military. On the border, there have been scores of Taliban soldiers in the Taliban army who have been killed in cross-border attacks. So there have been, but they don't,
Including TTP leaders as well.
and TTP leader, but in terms of Taliban soldiers, they have been killed by the Pakistani attacks along the border, scores of them. But most importantly, what's happened is the TTP has started killing Pakistani soldiers. And that's where Marshal Munir's role as leader of the Pakistani military is really important. As a leader of the Pakistani military, he must respond. Whenever a Pakistani soldier is killed or soldiers are killed, he has to take a response, and it has to be a military response, because the whole reason for him being in charge is because the Pakistani army supports him. And in order for the Pakistani army to support them, he must defend them. So every time the TTP kills a Pakistani soldier, there will be a response. And the TTP knows that.
Yes. Yes, please.
Thank you so much, Sayyid Faisal Ali Shah, journalist from Pakistan, to the former US Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense, sir. This question is for you. So it was Pakistan who mediated between United States and Afghanistan with the Doha deal, and now Pakistan is in crisis and trying to settle things with Afghan regime, and United States is nowhere. So is that a deliberate policy by United States, let go policy, let them suffer? Why United States is not taking any position? Me myself, like, I attended many of the Senate hearings, and I witnessed by my eyes number of senators were grilling on each other. Why China mediated between Saudi Arabia and Iran. I mean, China is big concern, and here also China is doing something between Afghanistan and Pakistan. So where is United States? Number one.
Well, the United States, as you probably know, is celebrating its 250th anniversary this year. We have a long history. We also have a recent history of losing wars. So in Vietnam, we lost a war. The US military left Vietnam. 50,000 American soldiers died in Vietnam. We spent much more money in Vietnam than we did in Afghanistan. We lost that war and we left. And then it took us over 20 years to come to terms with that. And for many of those 20 years, we just ignored Vietnam. We pretended it didn't exist. I believe the same thing is happening. We lost the war in Afghanistan. Many fewer Americans died in Afghanistan than in Vietnam. It was a smaller war for us. But it was also very hard for the United States to admit that it was defeated in Afghanistan. So Americans want to forget Afghanistan. So I think it's really important to remember that the US interest in Afghanistan was really never as great as it was in, say, Vietnam, or even before that in Korea, another war that we did not win. So just because the United States is big and powerful doesn't mean that it knows everything, that it has a big encompassing policy that does everything. The United States is always focused on itself and its own survival. And the Taliban in Pakistan don't threaten that. So I think it's important to look at it through that context.
To the former Minister for Afghanistan in Italy, Sir Waheed Omer, as we are very aware of that, it was President Reagan in 1983 who hosted Afghan fighters what he called Mujahideen at that time.
Yes.
And it was basically initiated at that time, and everything after that, it's very clearly something backed by United States. So when we are saying why Pakistan is not supporting democracy in Afghanistan and why they are not speaking too much about girls' education and democracy, so don't you think so? It's so unfair just putting fingers on Pakistan. Don't you think so United States have any responsibility regarding that? Because everything was backed by United States.
No, I did not make that suggestion. First of all, no, 1983 was not the start of the problems in Afghanistan. It started back in 74, 75, when Daud Khan was still in power. The Mujahideen leaders, they went on the other side to Pakistan and they were supported. US support came later. It's a long story. We all know it came later with the Russian direct invasion and all that. Now, I am not blaming Pakistan for not supporting democracy. We don't need Pakistan to support democracy in Afghanistan. I'm just stating a fact. And I think David was also very clear. I think Pakistan over the past 20 years, since 2021, had a chance to come to terms with Afghanistan. I think they had a more rational people in Afghanistan, both President Karzai and President Ghani and everybody else. They had more reliable partners in Afghanistan than an insurgent group that they helped install now. And they had all the chances. But I've been there throughout, and I'm not making claims. It's not a blame. I think that Pakistan miscalculated the fact that a democratic, free Afghanistan, which they believed at that time was being populated by non-Pashtuns, as Musharraf clearly said at that point, is not in the interest of Pakistan. But they failed to realize the fact that if there is a responsible government in Afghanistan, which cares about its people, which has international obligations, it's easier to deal with them than with the government that we have currently in Pakistan. So it is of Pakistan's own doing. It's not a blame. I do not represent the government and so on. But I think this is what I have observed over these years.
Fair enough.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so very much. Thanks to our audiences, and deeply appreciated our guests, David Sedney, Arif Ansar, and Waheed Omer. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.